Canada obviously had a very disappointing run in this year's edition of the Gold Cup, and I've brought together our friends to talk about whether or not they should be worried before the 2026 World Cup. I got some points to make. I'm sure they do too. But if you guys have any opinions on whether Canada should or should not be worried, let us know in the comments down below. Leave a like and subscribe and do all that jazz, you know. But to you, my friends, should Canada, after that Gold Cup, be a little bit worried for this next year?
I mean, I'll jump on this one first. I think that we have to look at that last game they lost because that's really the one that I think we were all like, a little shocked by. And you have to give a little credit to Guatemala, right? Because they showed a very good team. And
Mm-hmm.
they after Canada got that red card, they took advantage of that and they really dominated Canada after that. With that being said, like it was just not something you want to see from a top three team in CONCACAF, to be like that, to crumble like that. I'm a little worried, but I'm also not. I don't think I'm like red lights, like emergency DefCon. It's not at that level yet, but it's not the best way to kind of springboard into the World Cup. You wanted a bit more of a positive vibe going into it, but yeah, I feel like there's a lot of context there, even if it was a disappointing loss.
Yeah, that's fair. Joaquin?
Uh, yeah, I agree. It's not the worst case. It's definitely really disappointing for the expectations they had going in, but I still feel like they did a relatively okay group stage. Maybe could have gone the win out against Curaçao, except for that like an equalizer. But I still think they could be not proud, but they can move on and be like keep their heads up and say like okay, on to the next game.
Hmm. Okay, I'm gonna raise you guys a debate here, or a bit of a differing topic, right? And the Gold Cup sucked, right? They should not have. They really shouldn't have lost to Guatemala in the way that they did. We should be sitting here saying Canada at least made the final, or at very worst a semifinal here, which is definitely what they would have preferred. But Joaquin said, okay, we can just move on to the next game. At what point have they been doing that too much, right? Because this is starting to become a little bit of a trend with Canada, and I know maybe I'm being a little too harsh on them just because the time we have to look at them is not that grand. It's really only been a year where they're in the spotlight now. But you talk about
Mm-hmm.
Copa America semifinal finish, great. They were supposed to move on from that and do some great things right beyond that. They had a couple good friendlies, look good, look fine, everything's going good. Nations League really disappointed against Mexico. Now, granted, again, they played against the eventual winners, but really, really disappointed. Okay, we move on to the next thing. We look towards the Gold Cup after really disappointing Nations League. Then you go into the Gold Cup. You don't look amazing the whole time. If I'm being fully honest, that Honduras game was great. Obviously, 6 goals, fantastic. But beyond that point, they didn't look that good again. So then you are out of the Gold Cup in the quarterfinals, and it's becoming a pattern of disappointment to an extent. Maybe that's because we're setting too high expectations, but you only have a year left until that World Cup, and you've exhausted all of your opportunities to really make yourself look like the best in the region, right? As a result of that, I feel like you might have reason to worry just a little bit, because you really, I mean, you have all these friendlies going to the World Cup, but friendlies only mean so much in terms of momentum and whatnot. And I feel like you can see that when it comes to the players when they're playing too. Like, it doesn't mean a whole lot when it's all said and done unless it's like great, like unless they're beating France, Argentina, and all these things. Going into that World Cup, I feel like they are worried because now the only next opportunity to really, ascertain that you are a top footballing nation now and you're up there is by having a good World Cup. And then what happens if they don't do that? Blah blah. Andres, should they be worried now before that World Cup though?
No, I think this is one of the things where it's like you got to roll with the punches. Like they're on a high, obviously, from the last summer Copa America semifinals finish, and then they lost to Mexico. Not did they play great? No, but they lost to the eventual winners, and Mexico was on the up after that tournament. And then they lost to Guatemala, and obviously you can blame a lot of things for that. Jesse Marsch certainly did in his post conference after the game, having all these excuses, whatnot. But I think one of these things is just got to roll with the punches. Can be like, okay, this is what we're capable of. We just got to maintain the standard. And maybe it could have been say that they got complacent with it.
Mm.
Especially against that Curaçao game, you could have said they got a little
Mm-hmm.
complacent with everything. So I think it's just got to raise the levels and have a standard going forward. And I think they have the blueprint of what not to do against these teams. And I think for the World Cup, like I don't expect them to crash out or anything. You know, they got home field advantage. They're still a good footballing nation. We obviously don't know their group. No one does yet. In a couple months' time, I'm sure we will. But yeah, I just think it's not. They shouldn't worry too much. I think it's one of those things where you gotta just have a strong mental fortitude here and be like, all right, we didn't play great. We acknowledge that, but we know what to fix, and just keep rolling and then improve. I would press the panic button if they go a little winless in these upcoming friendlies over the next couple of months. That's when I'd hit the panic button. But if they're like, winning or at least in these games, I don't think there's anything to worry about.
I have one thing that I might be worried about. Not overall. Like I'm not worried about the entire project necessarily, but I think one thing they can be worried about is the fact that Canada is it's a team based success, right? There's hardly any players there that are individually making this team great and bringing them success and whatnot. I feel like they're playing very well under Jesse Marsch as a team, whatever system, right? What I think this Gold Cup is showing us, though, or did show us, is that as soon as you're losing one or two cogs there, whether that's they're not playing or they are playing and they're not performing as well, it really struggles to work. Like the success is really, really hard to come by once you lose one of those key players. One of them being Schaffelberg. Like red card aside, I don't think he played amazingly overall in that Gold Cup, and he's normally a very key player. So it's things like that, like they might be a little bit worried when it comes to this team's success overall, just because so many things could go wrong, and we're seeing that here and there. That maybe they're just like thinking about that a little more. But Diego, your thoughts?
I think it hurts them just because we know they're not as deep as the USA or as Mexico. So it definitely hurts when they lose those key players. I still think they need to make Alfonso Davies work in that team. I don't know who has the answer to that. Hopefully Jesse finds it, but they need to make it work because having someone like that who can just win them a game, whether it's offensively or defensively, would be so vital to their chances when they're not clicking. Because you, as a top team, you're never always going to click. But having that individual ability to once in a while come up big in a key moment to then change the game for you is so important. So hopefully that they can get worked out. I think that's a big thing. And I agree that they haven't won that like big trophy yet. With that being said, I still think um, it's hard to be super harsh because we know their recent come up. They don't have the most experience being at the top yet. That's still something you learn, and you learn the most by losing. And so the hope is that that they will use this as a big learning experience once again and then build on it more. Um, I guess there is a point though where you start to wonder if I love Jesse, he's my boy, but how long can you be like Jesse Marsch is that guy to bring Canada as a title or a championship contender for a World Cup or a Gold Cup. Obviously not contending for the World Cup itself, but getting far in that tournament. Um, we'll see. But it's just unfortunate when they maybe are still looking for some alternatives to top players when they are performing at their best, like you said, Elijah, or when they get that unfortunate red card, which is again always makes the game harder. Um, so I still like them. I still think they're going to do well, but it's obviously they don't have that experience or the talent pool that in Mexico have for sure, and that US are showing that they still can compete even with a B team. So you're like, when can Canada get to the point where even when you don't have the top players at their best or available, can you come in and still perform at a good level? I don't know. We gotta see if Jesse Marsch can figure that out.
I think one positive though they can take away is that they have a little more clarity into what their starting lineup might look like going into the World Cup than like US would due to not building that chemistry during this Gold Cup. So I do think that helps them a little bit knowing like what worked and what didn't, and just like we can fix or add this there and maybe this helps change results. So that at least they have a little bit more confidence about what their lineup might look like.
Yeah, one point I made because Andres and I recorded this video already, but it never made it to the page. But one point I made there was this, okay? And one thing I'm worried about for Canada, and I do think they should be worried about it to an extent, is the fact that I don't want Canada to go the Jamaica route, right? Where Jamaica, we for years now have been like, they could be really good. They could be title contenders. They should be title contenders. They might be a top 4 CONCACAF team. Blah blah blah. All these things, right? And in doing so, in saying that and predicting that, that skews our mental image of how Jamaica really is, right? Maybe we think of Jamaica as being better than they actually are, but when you look at performances, they're not. So that is what I'm scared about for Canada, is that Canada rides the wave of Canada can be a title contender. They can finally go against the USA, Panama, Mexico trio right now and maybe win something in CONCACAF and whatnot. But there's only so long that can carry your public perspective in CONCACAF 4. Like I said, Jamaica are really nearing the end of it, if not already past that. Because I think this Gold Cup really, really ascertained the fact that Jamaica aren't that top CONCACAF team, and they're not going to get that faith again until we see them being successful. I think Canada might be, unfortunately, a victim of the exact same complex when it comes to CONCACAF football. At some point, they're going to really need to start winning that. And, again, maybe I'm being a little too harsh on them because we only have a 1 year window of being able to analyze them. But at this rate, I really can't say that they're going to be winning these titles and whatnot, or being as good as we think they can be until I see just a little bit more. Because honestly, I have been really disappointed when it comes to their performances since the Copa America. That was great, but when you look back in history, if all we can say about Canada's golden generation was that they finished in the semifinals of the Copa America, that's not that much to write home about when it's all said and done. So I would be worried about that, because I do think the pressure is starting to build a little bit, just a little bit. They have some leeway, of course, but I do think that fans, Canada or not, do need to start seeing some results. And I do hope the World Cup will set that straight, because I do hope maybe Canada makes it out of the group, maybe they even go a round or two beyond that. Then that's not winning the World Cup but having a performance means more in that context than any other tournament in the world. So I'm hoping that we are able to see that next summer. But if they don't, let's say they do crash out of that Gold Cup, let's say they don't perform well at all, what do we have to go off of after that to really say that Canada is a top team? So yeah,
You could almost say that you've seen Canada perform better when they aren't the clear favorites. And I think maybe that's a bit of a mentality thing where, like, oh shoot, like we're actually like considered a top dog. We have to really kind of, you play a little different. You got to be more dominant. You got to control the possession more. And teams who aren't, they get to play a little more defensive and counterattack, like a Panama or Costa Rica. And so, maybe Canada needs to learn to transition into that stage where when you get into the Gold Cup and you are a top 3 favorite, you know that you have to be dominant from minute 1 to minute 90 as best you can. And so maybe it's a mentality thing that they're still lacking. I agree that, yes, there's definitely some pressure coming, but considering that they've been better than any Jamaican side I've seen in a long time, I hope that they can use that kind of encouragement of like, yes, we know we can do well. We just have to show that now, even when we are like, oh, it's just a game against this against this game against the CONCACAF team. You gotta win that game. Mexico and USA, at the end of the day, they do that. They still do that, and they've been doing that. Even when they're low points, they'll come back around and turn it around, and they'll start winning again. Canada just have to do that. They have to turn it around and start winning again.
I am also a little worried for Jesse Marsch's sake, right? Because football is a ruthless game when it comes to managers and staff members, right? So at what point is Canada can Canada be considered like stagnant, right? Like Jesse Marsch got them to this point, yes. Like we're having this conversation about them because of Jesse Marsch, truthfully. Like, yes, they also have some great players to be involved with the Canadian national team, but Jesse Marsch really elevated them as a manager. Now, at what point do you need to move on to someone who could push them further? Like, yes, it's a good point to be in, but you don't want to be in, we're just behind USA and Mexico in terms of success. Like what really does that matter? At some point, Jesse Marsch is going to have to start showing, real results to get things to make sure he stays there. And a bad Gold Cup or a bad World Cup, I'm sorry, I would not be surprised if he's not with his team anymore. Whether that's on his own fruition, which I do think it could be, he could just resign, or instead maybe them sacking him when it's all said and done. But I mean, who knows? That is speculative, of course. We'll have that video out when that, maybe if it does happen in the future. I just do think there might be too much of the same happening right now. Whereas I think if you really want to be, and I think should be, with this real good opportunity to get titles and get money back into the federation and whatnot, you really might have to start looking away or at anything else that's really improving your odds at doing so. And at some point, that might be getting rid of Jesse Marsch, unfortunately, as well as maybe some new kits. I want some new kits ready from Canada, by the way. Just keeping that limelight. The last kits were good, but I think I need some more. But yeah, I mean, Canada, again, pretty disappointing Gold Cup. We have nothing to go off of until the next point. The friendlies beforehand, they were doing pretty good. Now we only have friendlies moving forward. I think they're playing Australia, probably Colombia is what I'm hearing as well. So a lot of good matches to look forward to in the near future. But if you guys are big supporters of Canada, make sure to subscribe to the channel because we got a lot of Canadian content coming out relatively soon. Maybe even some collaborations with a channel or two in the Canadian football sphere that I might be working on or not. But make sure to keep an eye out for that. Information will come out, whenever it does and whatnot. Make sure to comment what you think, whether Canada should be worried or not. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. Leave a like if you want more Canadian content. And yeah, that's going to be it. My name is Elijah. I was joined by Diego, Joaquin, and Andres per usual. See you guys in future videos. Take care. Peace.